Looks like we're live. Hello everyone and welcome to yet another recreation programming session with Mr. Azuzin. Let's make a little bit of announcement and officially start the stream live on Twitch. And what are we doing today on Twitch.television website? Today we're adding a pop-up system to Visualizer, the music visualizer that we've been developing for quite some time. I'm gonna give the link to where we're doing all that, twitch.tv/todding, and I'm gonna ping everyone who's interested in being pinged. And there we go, the stream has officially started. Hopefully. Did it send a message? I don't see it sending a message. Discord, hello! Thank you so much for sending a message. Jesus. Right, so hello, welcome. So today we continue working on Visualizer, which is music visualizer. So let's take a look at this entire thing, how the application looks like. So let me quickly rebuild all this stuff. This is not how you rebuild it. Just a second. And I'm gonna run the Visualizer. So as you can see, it greets you with this message, drag and drop music in here. And what you're supposed to do in here, you're supposed to drag and drop some music. So let's actually go ahead and drag and drop a couple of files in here. Right. So this is how it looks like. And essentially you have a panel in here, you have a timeline you can control, and there's a music visualization and stuff like that. So the point is to be able to render all of that into high definition videos, right? So you can press R. In the future I'm going to add a button that actually renders everything, so you don't have to use shortcuts. The shortcuts are still going to be there, but there will be also UI button. Right, so it's not really like a music player, it's specifically a visualizer, right? It's meant to take a music and create high quality visualization of the music. So the visualization itself is also going to be customizable and stuff like that. So let me quickly disable what we've got in here. So it actually crashed, right? So nice. It didn't really crash. I just exited accidentally. Okay, so it's fine. So essentially, if you drag and drop the music that cannot be loaded, right? If you drag and drop the music that cannot be loaded, it will literally do nothing, right? So for example, I can drag and drop the folder, right? As you can see, it doesn't do anything, right? It doesn't do anything, though in the logs, it will say that it couldn't load the file, right? So error could not load file. Though I could have actually done a little bit a better job saying what exactly the kind of file I could not load. I think that would have been a little bit better. So if I go to src plug.c and find where exactly that is going on, right? So yeah, so I need to actually add the file path in here, so I'm not going to do it right now. Emacs, what the fuck is going on with you? Okay. Emacs is going crazy. So, and the fact that it doesn't really show you that, you know, you couldn't load the file is because we changed the way our UI UX works. Right, we completely changed the way our UI UX works. So in the past, you were not able to have several files, right? So, as you can see right now, you can literally drag and drop several files, maybe simultaneously, right? You can simultaneously drag and drop a bunch of files if you want to, right? Or you can drag and drop them separately, right? So, as you can see, it all works. So, before you could only drag and drop a single file, right? And we can take a look at how that worked, right? So I wonder at which commit we started to support several files. I don't really know. So there's muting, more UI work. So is there something like multiple? Yeah, roughly outline multiple file support. So we can actually check out this specific commit, right? So that was 2 months ago, actually, right? So I got, you know, derailed a little bit on other projects, so that's why it was so long ago, right? So I work on several projects simultaneously, right? So not everything comes as fast I would like to, but yeah. Anyway, so let's actually try to rebuild the entire thing and see how it goes, right? So this is an old build system, and because of that, it seems to me that it wants to rebuild everything. Okay, that's fine. So let's actually let it rebuild everything if it wants to. So yesu. So this is immediate mode UI, exactly. And let's actually try to run it. So, and the old version kind of looks the same. It kind of looks the same, but if you drag and drop the file that it cannot read, this is what it will show you. Right, this is what it will show you. If you drag and drop the file that it can read, it starts visualizing without the side panel or timeline and stuff like that. If you drag and drop what it cannot load again, it will switch back to this particular screen. So that works when you work only with one file at a time. As soon as you introduce the side panel that can actually store several files, that entire workflow breaks. Right, so how are you supposed to show like couldn't load file? How do you proceed from there? Right, so like where do you show all of that? So like once you introduce several files, this particular screen doesn't make any sense anymore. So the idea was, let's actually switch back to several files to the latest version, right? So let's go ahead and do that. Let's actually rebuild. Oh yeah, this is a funny one, so I just need to remove the folder and start from scratch. But if I start from scratch, I'll have to rebuild, Rayleigh, but it's not that big of a deal. Right, and if we take a look at how now works, right? So the idea was that once we introduce this side panel, if you drag and drop the file that it cannot load, it will show up the classical annoying Visual Studio Code pop-up somewhere here saying, you couldn't load the file, install the plugin for this version, you know, the Visual Studio thing. Right, so this is like the most logical thing to do in here, right? Just you cannot load the file, it will just spawn a pop-up here, I couldn't load that file, and that doesn't block any of the UI, so it's sort of like asynchronous from the UI, and then it fades out over time, right? That's basically was the idea. And then in the future, we could use this pop-up system not only for reporting these kind of errors, maybe in the future we're going to have more kind of errors that can happen, and we can report them through that pop-up system, right? So, and that's basically the topic of today's stream. Let's just go ahead and introduce this pop-up system, right? And yeah, so that's the topic for today's stream. That's the topic of the stream. Sounds good as sounds Gucci sounds Atamaguchi. Let's go. Anyway, so I think I'm not actually, yeah, so we don't have a hot reloading enabled. So let me quickly enable hot reloading. Right, so these days, how are you supposed to enable hot reloading? You're supposed to find a config.h in the build folder, and there will be define that you're supposed to enable, right? So you just enable that define, and that is it. You rerun nob, and it picks up the new configuration and actually builds everything with a hot reloading enabled. That's how cool the build system is. That's how cool the build system is. Can your cargo do that? Can your cargo do that? I don't freaking think so. I don't freaking, no, we're dunking on web devs today. Okay, can you webpack is old. Can you white do that? Can you white do, I don't fucking think so. You white cannot do shit, fuck. Right, I need to keep reminding myself who's we're dunking on today, right? So it's web devs. Okay, so white it is then. I know nothing about white, by the way, but it doesn't stop me. Right. So let's go ahead and actually load this entire thing. So we're gonna be hot reloading this entire stuff, right? So we're gonna keep hot reloading. So let me load this stuff up, and I'm going to just keep it somewhere here, right? So somewhere on the site. And where are we gonna have our epic pop-up? Where we're gonna have our epic pop-up? I guess somewhere here, right? I guess that makes sense to have the pop-up somewhere here. Okay, so let's go ahead and draw a rectangle there to indicate le pop-up. So if I remember correctly, this window where you preview the animation and stuff like that is called preview window, right? So let's actually find it. So this is a full screen button. This is not what I want to do. So plug, it has to be plug update. There we go. And we have a preview screen. So that's the function we have to work with. Okay, so this is a preview screen. So whether we have a track loaded, okay, so we do in fact have a track loaded. So then we handle some keys in here, like full screen and stuff like that. Whether we are in a full screen mode or not a full screen mode. Okay, so let's actually develop this entire thing for not a full screen mode somewhere here. Okay, so what we want to do, we want to draw a rectangle, right? So we want to draw a rectangle rect. And let me maybe find the definition of this function, because I want to know the signature of this function, right? So I have two ray libs in here, by the way. So we already updated to raylib 5, but I still have a previous version, even though I think it's not in the repo anymore, but whatever. So let's actually go to 5. So src raylib.h, right? So, and let's just find this function. And it's a very simple function. Draw rect. It accepts rect and the color of the rect that you want to draw, right? The color of the rect. Let me see, pop-up boundary. Let's actually call it pop-up boundary, and to make it stand out, let's actually use the red color. So, and the pop-up boundary is going to be something like pop-up boundary, right? And where it is going to stand, right? So where it is going to stand, I suppose we need to make it relative to the preview window, right? And the preview window is basically the preview boundary, right? So preview boundary. So in terms of x, right, so I suppose it has to be preview boundary x, which is this specific corner, and then plus preview boundary width, which basically this corner, right, which is this corner. And if we do all of that for y, right, so this is going to be y plus height, we basically find the position of the opposite corner in here. So we probably need to know, we need to decide what's going to be the pop-up width and pop-up height, because if we subtract pop-up width and pop-up height from the corresponding things in here, we basically get the where the pop-up's supposed to start, right? So it's going to be somewhere here. It's going to be somewhere here. We just have to decide what's going to be width and height of those mother flippers, right? So let's for now say that this thing is going to be 100 and the height is going to be maybe 50, right? So this is going to be maybe 50. And once we decide on width and height, we can just, like, you know, forward this entire width and height in here, and I'm going to query replace width with height. There you go, we've got this entire thing. I'm gonna quickly try to rebuild, just gently try to rebuild. I think it is rebuilding. Hot reload, look at that, it appears immediately in here. Can you react? Do that. Web devs coping and seething right now. Holy fucking shit. I'm so sorry. I ate a little bit of apples right before the stream. There is a lot of sugar in my blood, so don't take everything I say seriously, please. But that was easy. That was easy. Those people will tell you, you need a browser, you need a DOM to be able to do that. Fucking boom, boom, boom. C, pure C. Done. You have a red rectangle. You have a red rectangle. That fucking easy. Do you want to see something cool? Do you want to see something cool that web devs cannot do? I can freaking show you. Look. You can actually start from preview Windows X, but you can add half of the width of the preview boundary, right? And you can actually essentially subtract half of the width of the pop-up. And you can do the same with this kind of thing. You can do the same with this kind of thing, right? So, and I'm gonna basically restart this entire stuff. So there is a little bit of a problem in here because I forgot a comma, so that's fine. That is totally fine. Boom, centered perfectly, vertically and horizontally, instantly. Can your browser do that easily? Within seconds, less than a minute, centered perfectly, horizontally and vertically. You cannot do shit in browser, I'm telling you. I'm fucking Oh yeah, these days you have Flexbox and stuff like that. Sure. You need to, you need the resources of several multi-billion-dollar corporations to agree on the standards and update their browser engines just to be able to mimic the fraction of this power. Just to mimic the fraction of this power. Look how much resources you need. Here, I just boom, it's already done. No meetings involved, no development, no issues, nothing, just centered. That fucking easy. Anyways. Took 20 years for CSS to allow centering elements. Alright. So let's actually remove this thing. So let's go back. So we need to decide on the size of the pop-up, right? So we need to decide on the pop-up because this is a little bit small, right? So it's a little bit small. So let's make it maybe twice as wide, right? So let's make it twice as wide, and what's going to be that? So wideness looks okay. So this is a pretty good wideness, I would say, right? So this is a pretty good wideness. And how about 100 in here? So is 100 going to be good? Let's find out. Looks okay. So you can't really see that because of my stupid head, but that's the good pop-up, right? That's a good size of the pop-up to indicate some problems and stuff like that, right? So I think that's good. More or less. We can always change it in the future, right? So it's not like set in stone. It's not web. I'm joking. So let's go ahead. So the thing I don't like about it is that there's no padding between the edges of the pop-up. There should be a little bit of a padding. There should be a little bit of that margin, right? A little bit of that margin. So let's go ahead and introduce that. So I'm going to do a float pop-up padding, right? So this is a pop-up padding, and this is going to be just basically 10 pixels. So in essentially, we just have to subtract pop-up padding horizontally and pop-up padding vertically. So we're just subtracting all of that stuff, and that should be basically it. That enables the what happened? Did it crash? I think it crashed. God damn it. Can your browser do that? Window closed successfully. I think I pressed the quit button. Okay, so that's fine. It's fine. Nothing crashed. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. We didn't crash. It's false alarm. There we go. Look at that. Look at that. We'll have a little bit of a padding. A little bit of a padding. Super easy, super peasy. So let me see. So where is my plugin? I want to increase this entire thing a little bit. Where's my compilation mode? There we go. Right, so I'm gonna do H. Did it increase the thing? Okay, so there we go. So we have even more padding in here. Okay, looks good, looks Gucci, looks Tamaguchi. So, but we want to have the system has to have several pop-ups. So they should be stackable on top of each other, right? So they should be stackable on top of each other. So how can we even develop such system? How can we make them stackable on top of each other? So let's go ahead and try to do that. Essentially, let's imagine that we have several of them, right? So let's say we're going to have 2 pop-ups, right? We have 2 pop-ups now, and we're going to be essentially iterating in here, right? So that's the current amount of pop-ups. So all of that is going to be rendered in the loop. And since they're stacked up on top of each other, right? So they're stacked on top of each other. This is going to be a vertical offset. Effectively, it's a vertical offset. And essentially, what we're going to do, so we will have to subtract. So we add in height, but we're subtracting height and padding n times, right? So so that is rather interesting. So we have to just subtract pop-up height. Maybe we can simply say plus like this multiplied by I, right? multiplied by I. But that will make one of the pop-ups invisible because it's going to be basically 0. So some of them is going to be down there. So we can even take a look at how it's going to look like. I'm actually really curious. So if I do something like that, yeah, so there we go, it actually went down. So for that to work properly, I think what we have to do +1 for the I, right? So we have to do +1 for the I, and that will make it work perfectly, I think. So there we go. So that means that if I want to add more pop-ups to this system, so I can say now I want to have 3 pop-ups, it is going to work. Now I have 3 pop-ups. So I already basically have a rendering for the pop-ups, right? So, and essentially I can now have an array of pop-ups, and instead of n, I can use the size of that array, and for each pop-up in that array, it will just render this thing in there. So yeah, so isn't that poggers, right? So at some point it's going to kind of overflow, but I mean, that doesn't really matter, right? So there's this kind of that. So let's actually keep it at the size 3, right? So let's keep it at the size 3. Yeah, so we have that. I think that's pretty cool. So one of the things I probably want to do now, I want to take this entire stuff and maybe factor out into a separate function, right? Because I want to be able to use that function not only here, but for instance in full screen, right? If I do full screen, I went to full screen, there is no pop-up tray in here. I think pop-up tray is a good name for this thing, right? So pop-up tray, it's only visible in here, but you can drag and drop even in this mode, I think, right? So if I basically drag and drop, yeah, you can drag and drop in this mode. So that means an error may happen in this mode, and the pop-up tray should be visible there. Also, I think the pop-up tray should be visible in a tutorial. I'm gonna call this thing a tutorial, right? So basically, if you for the first time load something that is not loadable, there should be also pop-up in here. So this sort of like a mechanism that renders all of these pop-ups should be reusable across several screens, and because of that we'll need to put it to a separate function, right? So does it make sense? Does it make sense? I think it does make sense. So let's go ahead and do that. I think it's a good idea. So yeah, so pop-up widths and stuff like that. So I'm gonna copy paste this entire thing and essentially say pop-up tray, right? So, and since it's kind of bound to the preview window, right? So we'll have to provide the preview boundary, right? It's dependent on the preview boundary, right? So let's go ahead and do that. Static pop-up tray, right? So I'm gonna copy paste this entire thing in here, and there we go. So it's already factored out. Rectangle pop-up preview, right? So pop-up boundary, I would even say. Pop-up boundary. So let me try to rebuild this entire thing. Is it rebuildable? It a little bit. So it's not pop-up boundary, it's a preview boundary. I apologize for my mistake. Okay, go. Okay, so and let's copy paste a couple of stuff in here. Let's copy paste a couple of stuff in here. Right, so here's that. So in full screen, we don't have that. So let's go ahead and add that in a full screen. So if p full screen, right? So we can see that we have pop-up tray not in a full screen, but we can add it in a full screen as well, right? In a full screen, preview boundary is just different, right? So let's recompile this entire thing. So is it recompiled already? Okay, so if I go to full screen, the pop-up tray here is visible. It is in fact visible in here, it's visible in here, and it's visible in here, and depending on the mode, it's just located in different places, right? So you cannot see behind my camera, but I mean, like everything should be visible right now. I don't know what you guys are talking about. Right. I'm actually super proud of this volume thingy. So you may think it's like no big deal, right? But look all of the ways you can interact with this thing. So first of all, like it expands, right? And it collapses. It expands and collapses. You can drag it. You can click on this thing and drag it, and depending on dragging it, it actually changes its icon, right? You can drag it like that. You can click on specific things to jump to specific things, and you can click on that icon to toggle the mute, and it actually remembers the previous location, It actually remembers the previous location. And furthermore, when you're in a full screen mode, right, so if you wait long enough in a full screen mode, it disappears. But if you actually expand it in a full screen mode and stay in here, right, and you drag around like that, and you stand while dragging around, it is not going to disappear. The behavior of this element is actually rather complicated. And you may say, okay, it's no big deal for web applications, and it is true, it's no big deal for web applications, but it's written entirely in C. So it is written only using capabilities of placing shapes on the screen. And I'm saying that not to show off how great of a developer I am. Look, I can do that without the browser. No. I'm showing all that not to, right, I'm not bragging, right? I'm not bragging. I'm telling that just to show you like how much you can achieve with just simple placing of shapes on the screen. If such a dummy dum-dum can do that, you can do that as well. Right. I'm not bragging, I'm not showing off. In fact, I'm a very dumb developer. Right. I'm a very, I would say, mediocre developer. I've just been doing that for very long. Right. I've just been doing that for very long. Not as long as some people out there who's been doing that for 40 years, but anyway, I'm relatively dumb. So what I'm saying is that if you keep it simple, you can achieve a lot with very simple things. You can achieve like enormous amount of things. That's what I'm saying. A lot of things, right? It's kind of weird that sometimes when I show this kind of things, people are treating it like I'm trying to show off or anything like that, right? So it's actually quite the opposite. Can you use the mouse wheel? Yes, thank you so much. You can. I forgot about that. Thank you for reminding me. You can also use the mouse wheel. And all of that within a single component. All of that within a single component, you can do that. You can also press amp to toggle the mute. So there's also a keyboard support here as well. So I really like this element because it's such a simple element at the glance, but look how many ways you can interact with it, right? It's kind of cool, isn't it? It's just like, yeah, to make it interact with all of these possible ways, right? So you have to put some work in it, but it's not that hard. It's actually very simple. Right. And with the arrow keys, I didn't add the capability to do arrow keys, but I mean, yeah. So anyways, I also like this scrolling, which is super smooth with acceleration and stuff like that. And it's also implemented in pure C, right? So, and I'm not using any UI framework or anything like that. And I'm saying that not to flex on show off again, right? So Yusu. So we have that. So another thing I wanted to actually do, right, is to have this pop-up thingy and a drag and drop music here, right? I think it's quite important. So if I go to here, drag and drop music here, so we don't really have a preview window in here, so we might as well actually do it like that. So pop-up tray, right? So here's the pop-up tray, and we can use the clitoral. People quite often ask me, Zozin, how do I find clitoral? How do I find clitoral? This is actually very easy. So you go to the source code of raylib, right? You go to the source code of raylib, you go into the src and you locate a file called raylib.h. You locate a file raylib.h. You go there, right? You go to the beginning of the file and you find clitoral, and there you go. You located clitoral. It's that easy, everyone. It's that easy. Right, so sharing knowledge for you for free. So there we go. So we're gonna start with 0 in here. Right, so basically what I need a rectangle. I need a rectangle that covers the whole screen. Right, so, but do we have width and height in here? Yeah, we do have width and height, so I can just basically say width and height. Okay, there we go. Pop-up tray. Let's actually try to do that. And there we go. So essentially, if there will be in the future any errors while loading files in here, the pop-up is going to be visible. So the pop-up is going to be visible in here and also in the full screen, right? So 3 different scenarios, all of that stuff is in fact visible. All of that stuff is visible. Yusu. So the next thing we need to do, I think the pop-up should have rounded corners, right? So because right now it's too pointy, you can cut yourself on that corner, I think. So it's kind of dangerous, right? So you need to smooth out the corners. Right, you need to smooth out the corners. So let's try to do that, maybe. Let's give it a try. I don't quite remember, so let's go to rayleap one more time. Rayleap.h, draw rectangle, and I think it was something like a rounded, yeah, rectangle rounded. And so there's a roundness and segments. So let's go ahead and put it in here. So we need to find the pop-up tray. So here's the pop-up tray, and we want to replace this thing with something else. So here's the color. It's going to be red. It's going to be red. So pop-up boundary. Pop-up boundary, roundness. If I remember correctly, roundness is basically from 0 to 1, right? So we're going to make it like 80, and the amount of segments, let's make 20 or something. And now I'm going to try to recompile this entire stuff. Boom. That's too rounded, I think. So did we went like F? Did we F'd? I think because the server connection timed out reconnecting. Right, so maybe it's just Chatirina, maybe it's just my Chatirina, but anyway. So everything seems to be okay, everything seems to be docking. Okay, so let's actually make it maybe half, alright, because I think it's too much. Right. I actually did abnormally. It's kind of weird. Sometimes it just crashes when... Maybe it actually crashed when it was in the middle of writing or something, but I'm not quite sure what exactly happened in here. Okay, so this one is fine. This one is fine. So maybe, what about 30? What about 30? And there we go. I think this is better. So this sort of roundness is okay, I think. I think it looks good. It kind of looks close to how the other things looks in here. Right, so yeah. But the question is, does it have to be like this red? Does it have to be this super red? Right, it could have been just the background, right? So like this thing. So let's actually introduce maybe something like a pop-up background color, right? Pop-up background color. And at the top in the file, we have, yeah, it actually starts with a color, right? So you're supposed to name it color pop-up background, right? And the thing we usually like I have a general background color for all of the things in here, but not really. So there's the track panel button background, right? So we're going to be using the same color as the track panel button background, right? So I'm going to just like do it like that. And as you can see, we use it like literally for all of the things in here. Literally for all of the things in here. So it didn't compile because, yeah, I used the wrong naming. The color is supposed to be actually the prefix, right? So that is totally fine. That is totally fine. And I'm gonna just quickly refresh the whole thing, and there we go. So the pop-up looks like this. Does it look good? Does it convey that it's an error? Does it convey that it's an error? Maybe we should have actually used like an accent color instead of it's kind of bad, right? So we have a thing called accent color. What if we literally just use accent color accent, right? So maybe that's gonna be better. So nah, so it's basically the same colors that I used in here and stuff like that. Kind of low-key. Red background was actually kind of good, in my opinion. I think it was actually kind of good, right? So you can make it red. But red, we're using the standard red from rayleap, right? So what we can do, what we can do, we can actually use the red based on the accent color, right? So we're using HSV model to define the accent color. So it's a hue saturation value. We can keep saturation and value the same as the accent color, but we can say the hue has to be red. If I remember correctly, red is actually 0. So it's basically the angle on the color wheel, right? So hue is the angle on the color wheel, and 0 corresponds to red, if I remember correctly, right? So if I remember correctly, so 0 red. So I should go ahead and try to do that. So it's basically going to be the same saturation and value as the accent, right? So but with the red, and yeah, it made it kind of a little bit darker, which is probably fine, right? Which is probably fine. I think it's all right. So let's just keep it like this. Let's just keep it like this. Okay, so and we need to have some sort of a text there, right? So pop-up tray. So we need to render the text. We need to render the text in there. Okay, so who remembers how to draw the text, right? Draw text, right? Not texture, but text. Okay, so you can draw the text, but we need to be able to draw the text with different sizes and scales and stuff like that. So we're probably going to be using the text pro. Maybe pro is too much. Let's actually just use the draw text extension, right? It also allows you to specify the tint, spacing, font size, and so on and so forth. Okay. Right, so let's go ahead and just put the text in here. So the font we're going to be using the font from here, and the text is going to be something like could not load file, right. So where's we're gonna have a position, right? So where we're gonna have a position, this is actually very interesting. The position should be based on the pop-up boundary. So let's actually literally place it on pop-up boundary X and Y. All right, so this is going to be something like this. So this is where it's going to be located. The font size is rather interesting. So it's going to be float font size. I think I already did that trick where the font size was based on the boundary height. Yeah, that's a good idea. So yeah, here if we take a look, it's the basically boundary height, half of the boundary height. So I think I'm going to use this trick. Boundary height, literally half of the boundary height is going to be that. Spacing, we just can keep it 0, and this one is going to be simply white. Right, so this one is going to be simply white. So if I now try to recompile this entire thing, hopefully it will maybe work. And yeah, there we go. Could not load file. I think that's pretty cool. Right, so at least we placed something on the screen. It looks scuffed, it looks ugly, but we placed something on the screen, and that's a very good first step, right? Don't get discouraged by these kind of results, right? It's imperfect, but then once you have something on the screen, you can go ahead and refine it and make it better. You can work with that, you can iterate upon it. Don't get discouraged, don't listen to these goddamn haters. Just keep improving, just keep grinding. So remember Sigma grind set or Ligma balls. Ligma ball set. Ligma ball. Anyway, so let's actually try to reduce the size of the font, because I think if we look at it, right, so it's a little bit too big, right? It's a little bit too big. Right, so there we go. Okay. That's a little bit better. That's a little bit better, but now it's a little bit too small. It's a little bit too small, so let's make it, maybe make it a little bit bigger. What about 35? It's very sensitive, as you can see. It's very sensitive to the size. I don't really know why, but it actually is. Okay, 35. What about 30? What about 30? I think 30 is going to be perfect. Right, so font size for ants, I mean, it is what it is, and it is what it is. Anyway, so now we need to do something that web developers cannot do. We need to center it. We're about to center those mother flippers. We are about to center those mother flippers. But to do that, we need to know the size of the text, like the boundary of the text, the width and height and stuff like that. How the fuck can we even know that? How the fuck can we even know that? So there is a function that can do that for us. It's called measure text. Measure text, if I'm not, yeah, there we go. So essentially you provide the size and it basically gives you the boundary, right? So it basically gives you the boundary. Surprisingly, it also returns an integer. Why the heck it does return an integer? Measure string for default, and it's never specified. We can also always look it up because we have the source code of Radief, right? So we can just search for measure text and just see how it is in fact implemented. So it is implemented like this. And what do we return in here? We return X. I guess it makes sense, right? So maybe that's very interesting. So it's sort of like caters toward a very specific use case. So maybe this is a very common thing that you want to have from the text, just get the X, right? So, okay. So, I mean, this is not what I need, but that's fine. Wait a second. Measure text only gives you the X. This is not, yeah, width. No, this is not what we want. I want a full width and height. So we need measure text XC. That's right. Okay, so measure text returns you one thing, and measure text XC. So I thought that it maybe returns something from the pointer or something like that. I just had a huge brain fart. I'm really sorry. So I have a 40 brain today. So that's what we actually need. That's what we actually need. So, and we can do something like size, right? So we have already position, we have font size, and so on and so forth. So this is going to be that. We can now provide le text. The font size and the spacing is going to be obviously 0, so we have a size in here. So, but we probably need to now compute position based on the size of the text. So that means we have to put it above, right? So because all of that now will depend on the size. So now we have to add half of the pop-up boundary, essentially, right? Half of the pop-up boundary width, right? We add half and subtract half of the X of the size, right? So the centering trick I was talking about, right? So here we're gonna have height, and here we're gonna have width. So, and that should be enough, I think. That should be more than enough to center all of that. Scheiße. All right. Okay, good. Can your CSS do that easily? Just center that scheiße. Just center that scheiße. Maybe it could have been actually a little bit, you know, shorter, right? So I think it's just like a little bit too high, right? So there's a little bit like too much space in here, in my opinion. So maybe we should make it smaller. Right, so they're going to be like a thinner things. But since we already kind of figured out how to render everything, we can just control these kind of things, right? So height, let's say that height is going to be maybe 75, right? It was 100, but what about 75? Is 75 going to be a little bit better, right? And this is a very interesting thing because the size of the font depends on the height for some reason. All right, so now it became like a font for ants. What if we make it depend rather on the width than on the height? So is it going to be better? So it's probably gonna blow up. It crashed again. Why does that crash from time to time? I'm actually not sure. I'm actually not sure why. Okay, so could not load. Nice. So this what happens when you do that. Right, so I don't really know why it crashes. It's kind of bizarre. It's kind of bizarre, so we'll have to investigate that, but I don't think it's something super, super strange, super weird. Maybe I'm just like referring to some pointer or something. Yeah, so this is going to be just 1, so let's make it 2. Let's make it 2. So that's the difference between 1 and 2. I put 1, it's too small. I put 2, that's the shit I have to deal with, right? That's the shit I have to deal with, like measure units and everything. What about 15? Is 15 going to be perfect? Is 15 going to be perfect? It's actually, in fact, perfect, I think. Right. So, yeah, I think I like how all of that looks like, right? So in terms of like, I think that's a like okay pop-up for now. It's an okay pop-up for now. It's not ideal, but it's okay for now to indicate that you did a fucky wacky, oopsie doopsie, ooh. So for this kind of stuff, it is optimal, I think. Right, so, and we can increase the amount of test pop-ups in here, as you can see, right? So we can make 4 of them if we want to. Right, so there you go, we have 4 pop-ups now. So instead of 3, we have 4 of them. So it's a very easy system to experiment and play with. And again, all of that is in pure C. That's what you can get with this simplicity. Simplicity is the key. Simplicity, simplicity. Keep it simple. Quite often, by the way, people always confuse simplicity and difficulty. Maybe they do that intentionally, right? Or maybe they are coming from a different language where there's no distinction between simplicity and complexity. For example, I personally come from such language. My native language does not distinguish simplicity and complexity, and I confuse them as well quite often. Right, but in English there is a difference, right? So simplicity is a category. I was trying to say, people don't distinguish simplicity and difficulty, right? So simplicity and difficulty. So there's 2 kind of things. So what I'm trying to say, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. So I'm coming from such language that right, doesn't really distinguish that. Some people say, okay, so some people suggest that you can do that. Yeah, it is true. But not that many people pay enough attention to the difference between these 2 words, right? Not enough people pay attention like to the difference between 2 words, right? So there's two concepts, right? It's complexity, and difficulty, right? Difficulty. Complexity is basically how many moving parts you have in a system. If you have a complex system, it has a lot of moving parts. Difficulty is how much effort you have to put to like achieve something, right? Achieve something, right? So in a complexity, something something that has very low complexity, we call such thing simple, right? So something with a very low complexity, we usually call simple in English. Something that has a very low difficulty, we call easy, right? We call easy. What I'm saying is that what we need in software development is simplicity. We need to make things simple, otherwise they become very difficult to work with over time. So, and quite often I say, right, so that C is a simple language, and then I show how I work with C, and they say, how is that simple? It is simple. It is not easy, but it is simple. But over long run, if you keep the system simpler, it becomes easy to work with. Because the simpler the system is, the less problems it causes, the less moving parts it has. It's like a general engineering principle, actually, that we as software engineers, we call ourselves engineers, do not fully understand for some reason. Right, so we think that we can just keep tucking away complexity under the layers of abstractions, and just because it's behind the layer of abstraction, it doesn't exist anymore. It still exists. You do not solve the problem of too much complexity by piling layers of abstractions. You don't solve complexity by adding more complexity. You solve complexity by removing complexity. Does it make sense? I don't know. Does it make sense? Have you tried GUI? Yes. I didn't like it at the time. It felt a little bit, okay, it felt a little bit unfinished at the time I tried it. Maybe it became better. And it doesn't do what I want to do. Right. So I have a very specific vision about how UI is going to look like, how it's going to work, and how I'm going to be using it. And the GUI doesn't really fit that vision. I'm not saying that it's a bad library or anything like that. It's just like it doesn't fit what I want, right? If that makes any sense. I tried it, yeah. So it doesn't fit my goals. React, easy complexity, Vanilla.js, difficult simplicity. I don't know. So because there is a point at which complexity turns into difficulty, right? So you can, like, piling complexity is easy until that complexity that you pile turns into difficulty, right? It's a constant trade-off. It's just like, you know, constantly burning, right, the fuel, and then realize that you caused the climate change or something, right? I'm not sure if it's a good analogy, but there's like a lot of things in software engineering that are really hard to put into words unless you experience them yourself. Unless you experience them yourself. It's just like more experienced developers keep talking about complexity, simplicity. We need to keep things simple. We need to keep things simple. And then less experienced, arrogant developers come to the more experienced and demand, please explain me what you mean. I do not understand that. But the concern about keeping things simple comes from working with enormously complex system. Like the thing that you experience by working with system that is like 6-10 million lines of code, you cannot explain these problems and this thing with words. You literally cannot explain them. You have to experience them yourself, and less experienced developers demand explain all of these years of working on complex system like in a couple of words so I can agree with you, otherwise I'm not gonna agree with you. Like, I don't know. It's just like I think I want to make a small break, right? So I've been slapping the code for almost an hour. I don't even have tea, honestly, right? I forgot to prepare the tea, so I was developing with water. So I need to make a break, make a proper cup of tea, cup of tea, cup of tea, and then we're gonna continue. All right, so let's continue. So I'm thinking that there is a little bit of a kind of strange thing. So the padding of these buttons is one thing, but the padding of these things is different. So I'm not fully sure how I exactly want to go about it. So I kind of like the padding between the tool things, right? So the pop-ups. But I think maybe the right padding has to be aligned with the padding of buttons in here. I think that would make a little bit more sense, right, at least. Or maybe even, yeah, maybe the padding like top and right has to be like the same in here and in here. Which kind of means that we need to have 3 separate parameters: the right padding, the bottom padding, and the padding between the things. Right, the padding between the things. So that's probably something that we may want to work on. It's just something to keep, you know, to keep in mind. So now, what I want to do, I want to actually start keeping track of the pop-ups, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So here we have a plugin that stores the entire state of the application, right? So we have the entire state of the application, and I want to introduce the pop-up. So pop-up, I think, should contain at least the text of the error, right? It should contain the text of the error. But right now we only have one error, right? So we only have one error, which is like could not load file. So maybe pop-up is not going to store the text for now. One of the things that I think it should store like for how long it existed. It should store for how long it existed, because as we add them, they're going to be probably added at the bottom, right? So they're going to be appended at the bottom, and they're going to fade out as they age, so to speak, and they're going to disappear over time. So because of that, we probably going to have something like a lifetime, right? Which is a float, which probably will store the seconds, and the thing is going to slowly fade away. Or something like that, right? Roughly something like that. So, and also we need to have several of the pop-ups. So it's going to be probably something like a ring buffer, right? It's going to be something like a ring buffer. So how are we going to actually go about that, right? So maybe we're going to have something like a pop-ups, right? So pop-ups, maybe pop-up. Let's actually call it pop-up tray. Similarly to the function that renders the pop-up tray, right? So the pop-up tray, yeah. So there's a function that renders the pop tray, and we have a structure that stores the pop-up tray, right? It does in fact store the pop-up tray. So and we're gonna have a bunch of elements in here. So there are gonna be items, and to be fair, we probably don't want to have unlimited amount of pop-ups, because they probably not going to even fit in here. They're probably not going to even fit in here. So maybe we're going to have something like a pop-up tray capacity, right? So this is going to be pop-up tray capacity, and let's say we're going to have 10 pop-ups. We don't really need more than 10 pop-ups. So, and essentially this is going to be a ring buffer, right? It's going to be a ring buffer. And the way I implement the ring buffer, right, essentially I have a bunch of elements, like a limited amount of elements in the ring buffer, right, and I keep track of the begin, right, I keep track of the begin, and I keep track of the size, right, so basically the count of how many elements I have in a ring buffer, right, and that is usually enough to implement all of that. So if I add a new element to the right, I just increment the count. If I add it to the left, I increment the begin and the count, right? So, but then I can wrap around left and right, so to speak, right? I can wrap around left and right. And one of the things we'll have to do, we'll have to be able to add it to the beginning, right? Because we're going to be adding the pop-ups at the bottom, which the bottom is the beginning of the ring buffer, right? So we're going to be adding the pop-ups at the bottom, and we're going to be popping off them from the end. So it's sort of like a queue, right? It's sort of like a queue, but at the same time it's also a ring buffer, because if you overflow, the begin is going to just like wrap around and consume the older pop-ups, right? It's going to consume the older pop-ups. I think, yeah, that's a good idea. I think it's going to work out. I think it's going to work out. All right, so let's just give it a try. Let's just give it a try. Size t begin, size t end. All right, so that not really end, right? So it has to be the count, right? So it has to be the count. And we're gonna be storing this kind of pop-up tray in here. Pop-up tray, let's call it PT, right? So PT. And the way we're gonna be essentially rendering pop-up tray, the way we're gonna be rendering is we're going to be iterating through the elements of the PT, right? So instead of n, we're not iterating through n anymore, right? So we're iterating through p, which is plugin, which is the state of the plugin, pt, and the count, right? So that's what we're iterating through. That's what we're iterating through. And now, all right, and now, this is not what I want. If I refresh the whole thing, if I refresh, it doesn't refresh. So that's kind of, it actually hanged. I don't know why it, okay. So just a second, async shell, yeah. So why did it hang? So the count is supposed, this is because I updated the schema. Yeah, I cannot update the schema of the structure without restarting the whole application. That's fine, actually. That is fine. Right, so that's something that may happen. All right. So let's give it a try. Okay, so right now there's no a single pop-up, right? Because the pop-up tray is empty. But now I can try to, I can try to put something that is not loadable, and it's still not going to cause any problems. And this is because we need to implement the following thing. So remember there was like error load file pop-up, right? So, and this is where we need to add a new element to the pop-up. My neighbors are fucking doing something I don't really understand. Oh my god, and it's a midnight. It's a fucking midnight. These motherfuckers are fucking jumping around. Anyway. So how are we gonna go about that? So we probably can do something like pop-up tray push, right? So we push a new thing into the pop-up tray, right? Which is kind of silly, right? So maybe, yeah, maybe we just have to rename the entire thing to pop-up push, pop-up tray push, right? So right now it doesn't really accept anything, but yeah. And the way we're gonna do about that, essentially is so there are two situations actually, whether we already exceeded the capacity, right? So for example, if we still have a little bit of a pop-up capacity, pop-up tray capacity, we can simply do pt begin -1, right? And then pt count +1, and there you go, we append it to the beginning. Right, so we append it to the beginning, but here is an interesting thing. We're subtracting from an unsigned value, so if it's 0, it's going to underflow. So, and essentially we have to have an additional check in here. We cannot use mod in here, right? So if it is equal to 0, what we have to do, we have to set this entire thing to the pop-up tray capacity -1. We just have to wrap it around. Otherwise, we can actually subtract it like that, right? So we can't use modular arithmetic in here because it's unsigned stuff and everything. So this is one situation, right? So this is one situation. So if we ran out of capacity, we can essentially just overwrite the other end of the ring queue. So effectively we can just copy paste this thing, but we don't have to increment the count. We can keep the count the same. So that's basically the idea. And essentially that allows us to compress the entire thing like so. All right. Doesn't it? Yeah, it does. I think. There you go. So compression-oriented programming by Casey Moratori. You just implement something in a very straightforward way and then you compress it. So yeah, there we go. So we just increment like begin, begin, and then we see, do we have any more capacity? All right, so we just like increment that capacity. Otherwise, it's just gonna wrap around, and yeah, as usual. Okay, let's try to maybe refresh everything. So we don't have that. So here what we have to do pop-up tray push, right? So we're pushing stuff into the pop-up tray. And I'm gonna refresh the whole thing. So hopefully now I can load more music, right? But then I can load something that doesn't exist, and that added a new pop-up in here. So it couldn't load something, so it added pop-up. Added another one, and another one, and another one, and another one. Every time I cannot load something. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty epic. Right, so essentially the only thing we need to implement is for them to disappear over time, right? So we want them to disappear over time. So when we push the pop-up tray, right, so one of the things we probably want to do actually is basically take the items and pt begin, right? So that's the current item that we pushed in there, and we want to put a lifetime on that item, right? So for how long that pop-up is gonna exist, right? For how long is it going to exist? Let's say we're gonna have like a pop-up lifetime in seconds. Right? So for how many seconds it's going to exist, and we're gonna just assign this entire thing. So we're going to maybe go to this section where we're gonna have this kind of thing. So we already have, yeah, so maybe this thing should be called HUD pop-up lifetime in seconds, and let's say that it's going to exist for maybe 2 seconds. Okay, let's try to compile that and see where it complains. So this is basically HUD pop-up lifetime. So the way we're going to handle that lifetime, when we're rendering each individual pop-up in a train, right, when we're rendering, we can actually subtract the delta time, the current delta time, from the lifetime of the pop-up, right? So we can actually grab the pop-up, let's call it right, and gonna be p-pt items, right? So p-pt begin plus I, right? So begin, this is where all of these things begin, and then I is an offset. But here's an interesting thing, that offset can overflow, so we have to be a little bit careful. So we have to mod pop-up tray capacity, like so. And of course, since it's a pointer, we want to take a pointer, so it's a little bit easier. So we don't have to write this enormous expression every time we want to access the current pop-up. Maybe we want to tuck it behind some sort of a macro, but I mean, so we don't really have that many ring buffers right now, so it's fine. I'm going to keep it like this for now. Right, and every time we are processing the pop-up, and by the way, in the future, the text is going to be probably stored within the pop-up, right? So we're going to be doing something like it text, and you're going to just render the text that is in the pop-up, right? So different errors are going to have different texts and so on and so forth. But for now, we just have one single thing in here, so it doesn't matter. Right, so, and what we're going to be doing in here, we're just taking the lifetime and we're subtracting the get frame time, right? So yeah, we're just decrementing lifetime. We're just simply decrementing the lifetime. So maybe we can even extract that to a separate variable, so it's going to be float dt, and there we go. So here is an interesting thing. As we push the elements at the beginning, right? So we're pushing them at the beginning, and they start to age. So because we're pushing them at the beginning, they're gonna start die out at the end. They're always gonna die out at the end, since we're never actually inserting any pop-ups, new pop-ups in between, so they're always gonna fade away at the end, right? So what we can do, we can introduce a concept of pop-up pruning, sort of speak. So essentially, it's gonna be the following thing. It's gonna be a loop that looks at the potentially oldest pop-up in a queue, and if it's lifetime 0 or less, we just remove it from the queue, and we keep removing it until we find alive pop-ups. That way, like over time, they're gonna just like disappear naturally, and you know, deallocate the space for more future pop-ups, right? So because of the nature of how we push new pop-ups, we can just keep pruning them at the end, right? Does it make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. So and we can do that after we rendered the you know, pop-up tray. So essentially, while ppt count is greater than 0, we need to take a look at the last pop-up, right? We need to take a look at the last pop-up. So how can we find the last pop-up? We can take a look at the begin plus the count, right? So plus the count and -1, right? Because we need to find the last one. And then we do pt items, and there we go, that's the pop-up. So this is sort of like a top pop-up, right? Here's the thing. If top pop-up lifetime is less or equal than 0, well, that just means that we can remove it, and we can remove it by decrementing the count of all the pop-ups by 1, right? And we just keep doing that until we ran out of pop-ups to work with, right? And what's interesting is that if we encounter something that is not you know, alive, right? So that is actually has a lifetime greater than 0. I think we should break out of the loop immediately, right? So I think that's what we have to do. Because of that, we could have simplified the entire thing like that. And lifetime is greater than 0. Right, and just keep incrementing. I mean, it actually became simpler, honestly. Right, it's just the nature of how we work with the ring buffers is kind of fucked up. Right. So we need to have maybe some sort of macros, but I mean, maybe that's fine. Maybe that's fine for now. Right, so here we're sort of like pruning them. We're sort of like pruning them. Okay, so let's try to recompile this entire thing. And I'm gonna run this entire stuff. I'm gonna be running this entire stuff, and I'm going to just add these things in here. There we go. And I'm gonna try to load something that is not loadable. And it disappeared right away. Disappeared right away. But it appeared for a second, but then it disappeared right away. It's kind of funny, not gonna lie. Right, which is kind of funny. So let's try to find out what the fuck is going on. Actually, we have to do the following thing. It has to be less or equal than 0. So that's basically what happened. That's why it disappeared right away. Let's reload. And now I'm going to try this one more time. It lives for 2 seconds and then it should disappear. We can actually keep doing that and it will start disappearing from the top. And maybe in the future we're gonna also say, right, so what exactly the files that... Oh, this one does not disappear anymore, what the fuck? That is bizarre. That is absolutely bizarre. Not disappearing anymore. Okay. I don't know what it was. It's kind of weird. But anyway, so one of the things we probably want to do, right, we want to actually fade them away. Right. We want to fade them away. How can we do that? We can take the current lifetime, right? We can take the current lifetime and divide it by the maximum lifetime, right? So it's going to be HUD pop-up lifetime 6, right? And that is going to be the value from 0 to 1, which we can try to use as the alpha for the colors and stuff like that. So let's actually put it into alpha, like so. And for example, in here, so in array lib, I remember there was a color alpha, yeah, so which allows us to modify the current color and stuff like that. So we can do color alpha, right, like so, and this is just going to be alpha. Linear alpha scaling, yeah, linear alpha scaling. Well, I mean, we can make it like quadratic or something like that to make it look better or something. So we'll see, yeah, this is going to be another one, and let's go ahead and try to do that. So I'm going to refresh everything, and this thing is disappearing. That works surprisingly well. What the fuck? I mean, there we go, we have a feature. What the fuck? Okay, so we loaded some files and stuff. And now, if you try to load something that is not loadable, could not load the file. And it indicates it really well, I think. Right? Maybe it should like exist for a second, right, for a longer thing, but let me think what we can do. So maybe if we make it quadratic, so it's gonna basically, yeah, so I think we need to make it quadratic. All right, I think we need to make it quadratic. So I'm gonna take this thing and save it into T, right, and I'm gonna make it square. Not, is it quadratic? Yeah, square. I don't know. I confused the terms, I'm sorry. Okay, so we're gonna do that. We can try SQRT. Maybe SQRT is going to be a little better for this one. So let me see. Just trying to find the best look and feel for the whole thing. Right, so let's just try to find. Yeah, so it stays for a second, then quickly disappears. Is that better? I think it's interesting. Or maybe linear was okay. I feel like linear was kind of okay in this specific situation. Let's actually keep it linear. Yeah, I think linear was better for this kind of stuff. Alrighty. I wanted to like exist for a second. And then start disappearing. Right, so maybe it's going to be half of the lifetime. It's always 100%. And after the half of the lifetime, it's going to start fading out. Right. Right. It's going to start fading out. And how we're going to approach that? So essentially, if t is less than if t is greater than half, maybe equal or greater than half, we're gonna just say it's 1. Otherwise it is right smaller than 1. Right, it is smaller than 1. That means we need to divide it by half. Right, divided by half, and that's the alpha. So it's gonna wait for half of the lifetime and gonna stay, and then after that it's going to start fading out for a second. So we have 2 seconds of lifetime. So for a second it just displays and then starts disappearing. Right, that could be an interesting approach. I think that could be an interesting approach, and I did a fucky wacky. That's fine. Oopsie doopsie is totally expected in this specific situation. Totally expected. Right, so let's actually refresh this entire stuff and let's go. So for 1 second it exists and then disappears. I think that's good. All right, so we can also do it in here. Right, so all of that is visible. That is good. That is very, very good. So I achieved exactly what I wanted to achieve. So I think that is actually pretty progress. It was easier than expected, honestly. Right, it was actually easier than expected. So let me go through all of the changes that I've done. So we're using this pop-up thingy. Right. We're gonna try to use this pop-up thingy. Honestly, I would like to even have something that says could not load file and the name of the file, but then I'll have to think how to feed that thing into the pop-up. Right, it will be cool to have a slide animation where it kind of slides into the view vertically, and also next pop-up slides in with the previous pop-up slide. Yeah, that would be cool actually. That would be kind of cool. How can we even do that? So I'll need to think. Right, so it has to be something. It has to be something within within pop-up tray push. Right, within pop-up tray push. And so this is not something specific to any particular pop-up. This is something that is applicable to the whole tray. So it's a state of the tray when we are ignoring the begin element and we're fading that begin element in. But what if we receive messages too quickly? What if we receive messages too quickly? How do we accommodate that? So we need to also take into the situation when a new message comes in while we're animating the previous message. That is basically one of the things we have to take into account. That is actually very interesting problem. That is actually very interesting. Notification starts where the cursor dropped the file, then moves to the corner. That is actually a very cool idea, honestly. Right, because it makes it easier for the user to notice. Right, but again, that requires more like additional work. All right, so this is a very complex behavior. Right, it's a very complex behavior, and we can accidentally go over time. So, but sliding like in a new thing is something maybe doable within the current stream, maybe. So let me maybe commit whatever we have already. Let me commit what we have already. Okay. So introduce pop-up tray. And so I think, let me take a look at the diff. I remember there was a to-do in there. Yeah, implement annoying pop-up that indicates that we could not load the file. So this effectively is already done. This effectively is already finished. Okay, I really like that. Right, and I'm gonna push that right into the repo, I suppose. So yeah, effectively, a lot of like majority of the features that I wanted to have before the next alpha release are already done. I remember some of the other things I wanted to have. I wanted to have like a tooltips for the files and stuff like that. So essentially, if I have a bunch of files in here, when I hover over these sort of things, I wanted to have like a tooltips that show the full path or whatnot. Also, I wanted to have tooltips for the buttons in here that tell you what they do. But maybe I'm gonna leave that for the next releases, right? I don't know. I kind of want to release the next alpha already. And I definitely didn't want to release unless I have this, right? Because it's kind of weird to not at least tell the user that something went wrong, right? So it's kind of weird to not tell the user that something went wrong. So there should be a way to tell the user. There definitely should be something to tell the user. So maybe also it's kind of short, honestly. It's kind of short. So pop-up tray. So what if I make it 250? What if I make it 250? So let me see. Oh, that's actually good. Yeah. I think it's good. So, all right, we can try to think how exactly we're going to be sliding in. How exactly we're going to be sliding in. So this is a pop-up tray. So obviously we could say that we are we have some sort of additional parameter that indicates that we're sliding the element at items begin, right? So at items begin, maybe it would make sense to finally have something like define, you know, pop-up tray, or maybe PT, you know, begin, maybe like first, right? So where you get the PT, right? Where you get the PT, and then you do PT items and just PT begin. Right, so it gives you that. Then we have last, which is essentially PT begin plus the count mod the pop-up tray capacity. So we really want to have this kind of sort of macros, so we don't have to do this kind of stuff ourselves all the time. Furthermore, we can even have assertions, right? So this kind of stuff is not, you know, feasible if the count is equal to 0, right? You can't do that if the count is equal to 0. So we assume that the count is actually greater than 0. So I think that's quite important. So we can have a little bit of a range checks to make this entire stuff a little bit more safe. So on top of that, we can have PT get. Right, so PT index, and this one is also very important to be within the range, right? So index is less than PT count, right? So this is going to be that. And then what we're doing here, we just do it like that. So yeah, so this is a PT count actually -1, but here we have to do an index. And here is an interesting thing. We can re-implement PT first and PT last in terms of PT get, right? So we can always do PT get, PT, right? So PT, actually just 0, right? So this is 0. And then last is PT get, PT count, but -1, right? So that is expanded automatically. Right, so, and now we have these kind of things, and we don't have to think about how to extract information out of this ring buffer, right? So all of that is abstracted away with macros. Everyone loves macros. They, you know, fix a lot of errors and stuff like that. So, all right. So, and essentially, when A, right, when A is greater than 0, we know that we're animating PT first, right? So we're animating PT first. So we're not kind of displaying it, or we are displaying it with a special offset, right? So we're displaying it with a special offset. Yeah. And so the problem starts to, ooh, this one is good actually. I think I even know how to solve this kind of shit. Solve this kind of shit. We need to introduce, right, we need to introduce the time for how long we're gonna slide in the whole thing, right? So for how long we're sliding in the whole thing. So we already have HUD pop-up lifetime sec. Right, so we can introduce HUD pop-up slide in secs. How quickly you're gonna slide in. So sliding in has to be faster than fading out, obviously, right? It has to be faster than fading out. So I think sliding in for 200 milliseconds is fine, right? I think it is good, right? And yep, so pop-up tray. So we can even call it slide. So, and we know then when the slide is 0, there's no sliding in, right? Right. So there's no sliding in. If slide is greater, so this is the sort of interpolator that we use to slide everything, right? So that's the interpolator that we use. Okay. And when we do pop-up tray push, we're pushing a new thing. So when we're pushing a new thing, I also do PT slide HUD pop-up sliding secs. Right. So that's what I do. And over time, when we're drawing the pop-up tray, we're also, we can even say something like this. If slide is greater than 0, if it is greater than 0, we basically subtract dt. If it's less than 0, right? If it's less than 0, we sort of like stabilize it, right? So we make it equal to 0. There we go. We sort of make it equal to 0. Make it equal to 0. And here is an interesting thing. So effectively, this has something to do with the x-coordinate. So we can take PT slide and divide it by that global value, which is the HUD pop-up, I said, not lifetime, slide in secs, right? So there's this kind of interpolator. And essentially, the bigger it is, the more down we have to bring the whole thing. So yeah, this is something like that. So the bigger it is, effectively, we can save it like this. So this is going to be t. Okay, so we already have t. What if we say this is q, and this is an additional offset by which we have to bring this shit down? This is actually so simple and so genius, isn't it? Okay, I don't really use these macros yet, but maybe I should start using them at some point, but whatever. There's there. So, okay. That didn't fucking work. Why didn't... did I actually refresh? I think I... Well, okay. So, from a different side. From a different side. We have to do that from a different side, so that means we have to, I think, subtract this thing. I'm gonna sneeze, by the way, so get ready. Debated. So long we've been waiting. Who's the god cooder in here? So, but what if you have too many of them that you can't load? It jumps by one anyway, so it's designed to jump by one anyway. But wait a second. What if PT slide bigger than the maximum thing? It's gonna offset more than one slot. Tray push. What if, instead of assigning this thing, we add it? For each thing we add, it's gonna offset it even further. Why is this? Why is it so freaking simple? Wait a freaking second. So I didn't expect that such thing. So yeah, I mean, maybe we want to actually do that behind the preview thing, right? Preview actually does the scissors. Right, it does the scissors. Maybe we want to put that behind the scissors of the preview. So preview boundary. So I think it was somewhere if p full screen, and within this thing we have scissors. Okay, so that makes sense. We want to move the pop-up tray behind those scissors. Right, we're moving it behind those scissors. So now, right. We're doing this kind of thing. So I'm going to refresh this entire stuff. And now, so it's not going to be visible. Yeah, look at that. So it's behind the scissors. And on top of that, it kind of, yeah. What's funny is that if it fades away for too long, does it start? Yeah. That's so fucking cool. So it has to be faster. It has to slide in even faster than that. Right, so what about... you know, 50 milliseconds, super fast. All right, and now, so it's actually slides in very fast. It slides in very fast, but the reason why it slides in very fast is so it can do this kind of shit. Is that a good idea even? I don't know. So maybe it's too fast, right? So what about just one? Okay, so did it update anything? Yeah, so I feel like it is there. So yeah, I think this is a good system. I think this is a good system. This is actually super cool. Right, and we can, you know, work with that. We can improve its look and feel and stuff like. I didn't expect that sliding in is going to be that easy to implement, especially when you have too many things coming in very quickly. Right. So yeah, I guess we did that. So that's very cool. All right. So that's the power of simplicity, people. That's the power of simplicity. It's that simple, not because I'm somehow considering myself a god coder or anything like that, because I have little bullshit staying in front of me, staying in my way. Right, and I just raw dog in the UI, and it's just that fucking simple. Isn't that cool? I think it's pretty fucking cool. We just should not be afraid of simplicity. You should not be afraid of simplicity. Okay, implement pop-up tray sliding in. Right, I'm gonna push that right into the repo. Already ran out of tea. So if only you knew how hard it is to do something like that, like this in React. But I'm pretty sure there's a library for that. Just like import the library or something. So I'm pretty sure there's a library. It's pretty cool, especially in the tutorial. Right, and then you manage to load it in, and there we go. And it's working here as well. And they're sharing actually their sort of state, so I can just do something like that, and I can switch between full screen. It's sort of the same state. Right, so that's pretty cool. Right, so, and yeah, doing something like that in React is way easier, especially doing FFT and stuff like that. And I also coded this thing myself from scratch, using shaders and stuff like that. Alright, so I guess that's it for today. Thanks who's watching right now. I really appreciate it. Have a good one, and I see you all on the next recreation programming session with Mr. Azuzin. I love you all.